my dear friends, and welcome back to another Star Wars news update. It just seems like it's one cancellation after another for Lucasfilm. The most recent development, and this is just a rumour so take it with a pinch of salt, Taika Waititi's Star Wars movie is no longer happening. Again, rumour with a capital R. Nothing is confirmed, but to be honest guys, this wouldn't surprise me if it's true, and it's already a situation where for the last 3 years, Taika says, oh, I've got to work on this and I've got to work on that. Eventually I'll make my Star Wars project. It is coming sometime down the line. The rumour states, with recent cancellations and Lucasfilm not wanting to take any more risks, the upcoming untitled Taika Waititi movie is being scrapped. They say, interestingly enough, on the Marvel side of things, Taika recently came out and said he only did the Thor movies for the money. If you guys remember a couple of months ago, he also said that for his upcoming Star Wars movie, he wants to piss off the fans. And it's now been 4 years since the movie was announced. It was on May the 4th, 2020 on Star Wars Day. An article was posted on the official Star Wars website, Academy Award winner Taika Waititi to direct and co-write a new Star Wars feature for theatrical release. It's so depressing reading this article 4 years later because they were really hyping up the things to come, including the promise of Obi-Wan Kenobi and the Acolyte. It was also the same day they announced Leslye Headland was going to be developing an untitled Star Wars show. The title, The Acolyte, hadn't been announced, and her show has come and gone. And to contrast, we still don't have a title or a production date for the Taika movie. Now look, there's a very good chance this is absolute BS, just a BS rumour, but if there was any project in the upcoming slate announced that you could point to and safely say, well that's going to be cancelled, I would say it's Taika's movie. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing for Star Wars because we do have some exciting movies on the slate, the ones by Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, James Mangold, and I'm hoping one day they bring Rogue Squadron back into development. There's so much potential if they decide to set it in the New Republic. You guys know, my choice is Paul Sun-Hyung Lee as Carson Teva. Imagine a movie about his adventures. Now on the subject of cancellations, Rolling Stone put out a pretty interesting article about the future of Star Wars, and they basically seem to think that Star Wars fans are the reason what they call, quote, original storylines and time periods fail. It's similar to the piece I broke down and disagreed with the other day, this notion that Star Wars fans just want one thing, the Skywalker saga and nothing else. We don't want new storylines, we don't want original characters, we just want the familiar, and that's just simply not the case. The other day was Decider who was saying, Star Wars fans don't know what they want, they don't even know what Star Wars is anymore, and they can't agree on it. While there is some truth to us being a very passionate, at times divided fan base with very vocal opinions, I don't think it's a fair assessment to say that because fans didn't like one specific series and its handling of characters, that we want to write off any new time period and any new story altogether. There seems to be this bizarre conflation between, because The Acolyte wasn't well received, we don't want anything outside of episodes 1 to 9. It's not because it was High Republic. And it's not because, as some fans say, it tried to do something different. Star Wars has proven it can do different in clever ways. And even in some of the stories that do have overlaps with the so-called familiar George Lucas saga territory, some of the newer concepts and introductions to the canon were some of the most popular. Now, if you want to come out and say, we do have a lot of Skywalker saga content, and there is an over-reliance at times on fan service, that's a different issue and a separate conversation. But to say that The Acolyte failed because of the time period it was in, and because so-called toxic fans rejected it because it was a new storyline and something different, I must admit that's a bad assessment. And just because something is new doesn't mean it's going to be good. It doesn't mean we can't criticize it and acknowledge times where writers and showrunners clearly don't understand the heart of this franchise and what makes Star Wars special. It's so reductionist to say that everyone who criticized the show falls under this category of just not wanting anything new. Here are a couple of quotes from the article I want to break down. These fans say they're fighting for Star Wars' future, but if their endless fantasy world can't accept any stories they don't recognize, some of the self-professed biggest fans in all the worlds could be closing themselves off to any future at all. Again, there's this delusional idea that if it's not Luke and it's not Anakin and if it's not Ahsoka, we just can't handle it. Some of my favorite Star Wars stories, many of them in the Disney era, deviate from familiar territory. I'm thinking of novels like Rebel Rising, which at the time was, pretty different in terms of Star Wars' publishing initiative. A New Dawn, an accompaniment in some ways to Star Wars Rebels, was very novel at the time. Even Rebels itself, fans were comparing it to the Clone Wars and saying it's nowhere near as good. It's so different. Who is this pink-haired Sabine woman? Who is Zeb? Who are all these new characters? Another great example, Catalyst, a Rogue One novel by James Luceno, focusing on two characters created by Disney, Galen Erso and Orson Krennic. And yes, sure, the backdrop is the development of the Death Star and the events leading up to the original trilogy. However, there is plenty of new territory and it was so refreshing. Even trilogies like Alphabet Squadron, that was a brand new era set after Return of the Jedi. It follows a group of New Republic pilots tasked with hunting down an Imperial squadron. And even the Acolyte itself, which the Rolling Stone is holding to a very high standard, drew upon so many previous concepts. And before we saw what the series was, the premise of a Sith-oriented show 100 years before The Phantom Menace was so exciting. I know it sounds so repetitious, but write a good Star Wars story and fans will be down for it. It doesn't matter when it takes place. There are some stories in the Old Republic or even older, even Dawn of the Jedi, that have so little to do with the visual Star Wars media that we know and love, that still have phenomenal characters and a great narrative. Rolling Stone also says, the Star Wars fans clamoring for a return to the originals aren't just talking nonsense, they're ruining their chances to see the franchise they love grow in any meaningful way. If you're talking about fans who want more content with Luke, Han and Leia, that's not a return to the originals. It's wanting more stories with characters that we know and love. If Disney gave us characters as strong, we'd want more stories with them. I think these people are acting as though Chimera, Osha and some of the other characters in the Acolyte are the strongest in the franchise, and personally I just don't see that. And again, there's more fan blaming. They say, while Disney has never said these voices are directly impacting what shows get made, the vocal minority of Star Wars devotees keep limiting what they'll accept as true Star Wars. Okay, but is that because Star Wars fans have just arbitrarily decided, you know what, we just want Star Wars to be George Lucas and it's just got to be this time frame? Or is it because the stories Disney have given us, the alternatives, just not as good? And then they write, what is crystal clear is that before Star Wars can have another successful show, the loudest voices online need to realise the Star Wars they want to return to never existed in the first place. Will the real Star Wars please stand up? It's the same old straw man that they're giving us. Have they considered, maybe Star Wars fans who've been devotees to the franchise for decades might know a thing or two about this franchise, may have a reason why they like some stories like the original trilogy and the Timothy Zahn trilogy? Do you think Star Wars fans want to hate Star Wars for the sake of it? I know there are loud voices in the fandom and I know there are definitely fans who do love to moan and complain about it. But to paint everyone who didn't like the Acolyte with the same brush that they just don't know what real Star Wars is and nothing's ever going to be good enough is just flat out false. I think what's really disheartening for me as a Star Wars fan seeing all of this discourse online is how journalists, but even more so fans, are willing to throw other fans under the bus to defend a conglomerate or a corporation like Disney. Was there a lot of backlash for the Acolyte? Absolutely. Was some of it unwarranted? Oh, absolutely. There were lots of fans who wrote the show off before it dropped, which I don't think was a fair assessment. But I think what they fail to realise is that Disney is trying to make a profit, and they don't care about any metric other than viewership. And there's no emotion to Disney's decision. They're not trying to pander to any type of fan. They've just been more strict, Disney and Lucasfilm in recent years, about only renewing and continuing stories and content that makes them money. And there's more of a chance of Kenobi and Boba Fett because both of those had incredible finale viewership. But the media, in response to the Acolyte stuff, has been pretty crazy. What do you guys think? Share your thoughts on everything we spoke about in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, check me out on socials, and may the Force be with you, always.